Hi, Tim. Thanks for joining us for the Booklovers Festival. So thank you for joining us today. Just wanted to ask you, what does the festival theme of creative resilience mean to you?
Well, it's a good question. For me, looking back over all my journeys and my book writing, I find that I think resilience is probably a more important outcome of adversity and challenge, and in my case, adventures, than the destination. And I remember being halfway through my book on the trail of Genghis Khan that took 4 years to write in the end. And I was feeling very overwhelmed about a year into the writing process. And there was an author who sat me down and he said, "Well, Tim, you would never write a book if you knew what it was going to be." And somehow that completely changed my attitude. I realised that writing, like any creative pursuit, you need to treat it like an adventure where you may have a concept of where you might go, but the voice that emerges, the story that emerges is unknown. And instead of thinking of that as being difficult and overwhelming, I started to think of it as an exciting adventure. And that's part of what I guess I think about when it comes to creative resilience. Yeah.
Great. So do you feel that resilience is important in your work? You kind of answered some of that, but
Yes,
process?
definitely. When I was partway through my horse journey from Mongolia to Hungary, which ended up taking 3.5 years, I ended up being stuck in a place called the Starving Steppe of Kazakhstan. Middle of winter, it was -30, -40, and my dog, unfortunately, was stolen by some unemployed mine workers. Among many other delays, my petrol stove broke. I came back to this place. It was a bankrupt gold mining town that was a picture of kind of a dystopian world. And I thought I'd never leave, but there were a couple of people who took me in and they sat me down many times and said, "Tim, just sit back, relax. Your time will come. Perhaps sell your horses before they get eaten. Times are tough here, uh, but you'll have your opportunity." And they say in Kazakh, if you must rush in life, rush slowly. And that was when I recognized that, sure, this was not the ideal of the experience I wanted, but that was beyond my control. And in actual fact, there was something there to be learned. This was an environment, albeit not very romantic, where time wasn't measured in dollars and cents, where it was more about the rise and fall of the sun, in my case, the condition of my animals. And that was precisely the type of experience I'd wanted in the end. I wanted to break out of our social constructs and have a true, authentic adventure of a culture and a place that would turn my perceptions upside down, which it did. So I see resilience through that saying about if you must rush, rush slowly. And I'm trying to apply that same philosophy to life in lockdown. I feel like I'm back in the middle of Kazakhstan right now.
I love that saying. So with your adventuring, that must in itself build some resilience, or do you think that you took to that life because you were already a fairly resilient person?
I think resilience is something like learning music, learning to write, that you develop incrementally. And sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or even more. And I feel like the same type of resilience that I built up over time through that challenge, I was able to apply to the writing process, which was every bit as challenging. I feel as if you're fortunate enough, as I was, to have positive experience through great adversity, then it builds up your resilience. And that's why I'm such an advocate for getting kids to go out and have adventures, to take risks, albeit responsible, and to not be too afraid of failing. And I think through that process of sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding, you do develop a sense of resilience and be able to put things into perspective.
Brilliant. How have you gone with being being creative throughout lockdown? Has that been harder than usual?
Yeah, I think like for everyone, it's been very disorientating. I realised how important sometimes being able to have a frame of reference to be able to plan is. And as the sands keep shifting under our feet and the goalposts keep moving, I have found that element very, very difficult. But on the other hand, I've found a greater comfort in creativity. So one of the projects I'm working on at the moment is a documentary about my dog Tigger, who came with me for 3 years on that grand adventure, and he got into all types of adventures and became my best friend. I've decided to make this documentary through his eyes. So roughly, it's, for those who don't know the story, I was in Kazakhstan 6 months into this journey, looking down the barrel of the coldest winter in about 40 years, as it turned out. And this man, Asset, a Kazakh man, decided to travel with me for a couple of weeks. And at the end of that, before saying farewell, he said, well, you need a friend on this road, someone to keep you warm at night and protect you from wolves. So he gave me Tigon, who was this tiny little pup. And I looked at this dog and thought he won't survive more than a couple of weeks. And Asset looked back at me and said, in our country, dogs choose their humans, and you're his. and so the book is really, from his point of view, reminiscing on his adventures in his life. And I guess it starts something like, this is Tim. I've owned him for about 14 years. Yeah. So,
wow.
so I have found great comfort in creativity, and it's enabled me to escape the four walls of my apartment.
Absolutely, that's so important. But yes, harder than usual in a lot of ways at the moment, I think. Yeah. But that's a really creative viewpoint for your documentary. Did that come to you easily?
Well, I had always imagined, I've just written this young adults book about Tim and Tigon, and I had imagined writing that book initially through his eyes, but it didn't quite work out. So instead I wrote it from my point of view, but about him. But it felt right to do it through Tigon's eyes through documentary, because the moment I started thinking about it, I realised that it gave me this much greater opportunity to be creative, to imagine, and perhaps you could say embellish, but to imagine what life is like through his eyes. And that subtle shift in perspective from mine to his has opened up a whole new exciting prospect for me. So that's why I've done it.
Is great. So it takes you out of the strict documentary into a bit more of a creative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think universally, a dog has the ability to cut through cross-culturally and everything else. And I think we all imagine ourselves sometimes not as a dog, but we can see our own selves in dogs. And so we all have that ability sometimes to imagine what their world might be like. Yeah.
Definitely. How do you think that the writing process itself requires resilience?
Well, it can be a very long process, and it's kind of unlike starting a journey from A to B, whereby you might know where the destination is and how far away it is. Sometimes you simply don't know where the writing is leading and how far it will go. You may have a general idea of the story. In my case, I started writing my first book about this journey, On the Trail of Genghis Khan, with the aim of writing a 70 to 90,000 word book. I had a 1-year deadline with my publisher. Well, 4 years later, I finished the book that ended up being about 170,000 words, and the first draft had taken me more than 2.5 or 3 years to write, and it was more than 300,000 words. So you do need that resilience to keep going back to the pen and paper the computer screen day in, day out, and accepting that some days you just won't make it, but if you stick at it, you'll have a breakthrough. I think someone once told me some other very good advice, which is that writing is about 10% inspiration and 90% hard work. So mostly it's about going out there and just practicing and writing, and eventually you'll get there. So you do need resilience for that.
And lastly, Tim, is Tigon still with you?
Sadly, 2 years ago, I was back in Mongolia running treks as I do, and I received news from my mum. I left him that he'd gotten himself into an adventure and he had passed away. So he was 14 years old, and so at that stage I was 2/3 into writing my book, Tim and Tigon, and I guess if there is a silver lining of his passing, it was that he injected a special creativity into that last finishing of the book, which I think has now become an ode to him.
Oh, sorry to hear that, but he sounds like a very special dog.
He was. I'm very fortunate to be his. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us for the Booklovers Festival. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kate.